So welcome to the HR Huddle, everybody. I'm Eloise Shelton of Vanilla Recruitment. We specialise in recruiting HR, marketing, office and accountancy roles. Today, I'm joined by Mo Burry of Momentum Training and Development to discuss neurodiversity in the workplace. Today's session is going to last approximately an hour. The session is going to be recorded, so if I can ask you to mute yourselves if you don't mind for the recording. If you've got any questions as we're going along, please put them in the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can. I'll put them to Mo as we're going along. So Mo, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to pass over to you so you can share your knowledge and wisdom on the topic of neurodiversity.
Thank you, Eloise, and welcome, and lovely to see everyone, or everyone's names. So I'm Mo. I have been an independent trainer coach for 15, 16 years now. And a few years ago, I happened across this word I had literally never heard before, neurodiversity. And a friend of mine had got in touch with me. He said, I know you're a good trainer. Will you come and learn how to do this neurodiversity stuff and become one of my trainers? And I was like, yeah, I could probably do that. What's neurodiversity? Literally never heard the word. But from that moment on, my life, my whole experience of being human has changed somewhat dramatically, mainly because I just didn't know. I didn't know that I was neurodivergent. I didn't know that my daughters were neurodivergent. I didn't know that there were people who were struggling and suffering in my world because I'd never come across it. I just never had that experience. And what it's done is it's made me a bit soapboxy, actually. I'm a bit like, I've got to tell everyone, just sit still, let me tell you about this stuff. But what's happened is, because of the work I've been doing developing this program with the amazing team at Thrive, and at Thrive we create all sorts of different programs. We work with large organizations like Coca-Cola, and it's a team. We're a team of neurodivergent trainers. We're a team of neurodivergent creators. So it's all very much from lived experience. And since then, I've been delivering this stuff for a while now. So yeah, what I wanted to share with you really today is some of the things that I feel everyone should know. And everyone, no matter what your job, but especially if you're in a role where you are in a helping role, a supporting role, anything to do with HR, management, these are things that, somebody should have told us. So that's really my aim from this session today, is just to share some of the key things that I think I'm on a bit of a mission about. I've got the chat box open, so I would like it if you would use that. Eloise is going to keep an eye on it for me because I get a bit distracted. You'll understand why. And also, I will ask you questions and I will ask you to talk to me. So if that's okay, I would be grateful as and when just to sort of use the chat to communicate with me. First thing you need to check is that you've actually got the whole screen and not all the little ones. Have we got the normal single screen? I'm looking for a thumbs up. Yes, great stuff.
Yep, it's all good.
Thank you. So where do we start? Okay, well, the first question really for me to think about is, where does it impact? So let's start you off, get you working on this already. If you could pop something in the chat. In any business organisation, I am talking about neurodiversity in the workplace, first of all. Where do you think neurodiversity has an impact? Different thinking times. So if you're not familiar with the term neurodiversity, I should probably start there. It is a different brain type, a different neurotype. It's a brain that works differently to the more typical brain, and the differences cause every individual to have a different experience of being human and a different experience of being alive, and interact with other people and situations in a way that's different to the more normal, sort of typical, normal, in inverted commas, typical brains. I'll explain in a bit more depth. I'm not going to go into tiny detail about all of the finer details. I just want to talk about how it impacts. So let's get you working. Helen, how to process information, instructions on tasks. Absolutely. If you've got a neurodivergent brain, what will happen is you might see something and go, nope, no idea, it doesn't make any sense. So how we process information, how you instruct somebody. Carol says everything in business. Yes, that is the correct answer. Absolutely everything in business, including the fabulous benefits, yeah, such as the creativity, the ability to process, the reliability, all of those wonderful things. Recruitment, Elaine, you're absolutely spot on. Recruitment is really key. How we do that means we may or may not attract the right talent, and knowing how to do it in the right way can make a huge difference. Yeah, get those fabulous benefits in there. Yeah, the working environment, meetings, absolutely, working practices all over the place. Someone may understand a task in a different way to the neurotypical brain. Absolutely. They'll interpret a lot of things differently because it's just they see things differently, experience things differently. Becky, you're absolutely spot on everywhere. And yeah, Antonia, a timekeeping and deadlines, very much so, especially for someone like me with an ADHD brain. We don't experience time in straight lines. It's kind of wobbly and a bit vague. So yes, timekeeping can be a real challenge. And how people interact with others, Claire, again, spot on. That experience of being a human with another human can be very different depending on your neurotype. So some brilliant answers there. So nobody's completely lost in this. The real thing, if you think of the journey of a new person who's just started with an organization, before they've even come for an interview, your brand, how your organization is seen, how they're perceived. Is this a company I want to work for? Do their values match mine? Then they'll get invited to an interview. How is that invitation received? Is it neurodivergent friendly? Is it easy for a person to be able to understand? The whole onboarding process, how they're trained, how they're recruited, how they're interviewed. So many people go, oh yeah, nice candidate, look great on CV, but wouldn't give me any eye contact. Unless eye contact is actually a critical part of that role, it doesn't matter. They don't give you eye contact in an interview. But we need to consider all of these things. It's so key for retention, how you actually retain your existing staff, because people get burnt out, overwhelmed, exhausted, and stressed. And what a difference it can make if they're allowed to be at their absolute best at work. They'll stay, and they'll stay with you. Lots of different things can come up. Disputes, I'm guessing for many of you, you might be independent. You have to deal with disputes and disagreements. Really important to understand the perspective of the neurodivergent individual to be able to understand why they see it the way they do, and why, you know, when somebody says, I can't stand working with this person, they're rude. Actually, I can't stand working with this person because I don't get that they speak in such direct language. I interpret that as rudeness. I don't know how to take that on. So really, everyone becoming aware, not just the individuals, not just the managers, but everyone in the workplace. I mean, this is something personally I believe we should be delivering at schools. There should be a much wider understanding. Things like health and safety. Really easy to forget that signage. If you've got signage and it's all glossy white laminates and bright colours, some people just won't be able to see it or read it, or find it very difficult to take that information in if they're dyslexic. Something like health and safety rules and regulations, if those don't make sense for that person, they won't adhere to them because it doesn't make sense for them. So really every single element of being in an organisation is affected by understanding the different types of brains that we have. So let's explore that in a little bit more depth. So first of all, these are just a few sort of surface level statistics. 1 in 7 people are currently recognised being diagnosed as neurodivergent. Getting a diagnosis at the moment in the UK is somewhere between 18 months and 7 years, depending on where you live. My daughter has just got her diagnosis, final stages through, and she's been on the waiting list for 2 years. I've only just recently signed up, and he said it's probably 3 to 4 years because we're focusing most of our attention on children. An adult diagnosis is just, yeah, you've lived with it this long. And that's true to some degree. I did have a reason for going for a diagnosis, which I'll tell you about later. 24%, and I picked the construction industry because it's something, you know, everybody has a bit of a clue about what it's like to be in the building world. You've hopefully had some experience or exposure to that. 24% of people in construction consider themselves to be neurodivergent. 36% of those people have never told anyone. That's scary. And again, that can be really key, because if a person is protected under the protected characteristics in the Equality at Work or Quality Act, as it is 2010, they don't have to have a diagnosis if they're neurodivergent. They simply have to identify as neurodivergent. So they are just as protected to somebody who's got the bit of paper. And that's something that we need to be mindful of. 22%, only 22% of autistic individuals are actually in any kind of employment. Now, I will give you stories about my family because it's so close to my heart. My daughter, she's 26 now, discovered that she was, well, we think autistic and ADHD. Pretty sure there's an element of autism there. Comorbidities are quite normal. People have both. And she went to, she looked at a job and she thought, I'm not happy, I'm not enjoying it. She found another job where she checks orders that come in from opticians to get the quality right for lenses for glasses. And the top most successful person they'd ever had in quality control was at 78%. So 78% of the time, they checked the orders, made the corrections, got them right. 78% of their orders were perfect. Some of them were still wrong. My daughter got the job, and they actually, the CEO of the whole company came to her and said, what are you doing? What is it that you're doing that's different? And she went, well, I don't know. I just, I see the problems, I see the mistakes. And I said, well, we don't understand it, but your statistical average is 99% accuracy. And we don't know how. And she said, well, it's kind of like the mistakes just sort of jump off the page at me in bold. That's the difference of having a neurodivergent brain. She can see things that other people don't see in a way that people don't see them. And there are 78% of the population of autistic people, they're just sitting there with nothing to do. And it's crazy. We've got so many opportunities to use those incredible skills. 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. That's, again, possibly an underestimation, but certainly we know that if you're an entrepreneur and you are neurotypical, you are in the minority. So all these amazing brains are out there, and everyone is totally missing the opportunity to help them be their absolute best. But the scariest statistic, and again, this varies depending on which charity you look at, between 9 and 11 times more likely to die by suicide if you're autistic, because the sheer frustration of being alive in a neurotypical world is enough to break some people. And it's heartbreaking. So many organisations have invested so much money in mental health first aid training, and it's right to do that. But let's go upstream. Let's stop them getting into that place in the first place by creating an environment where they can absolutely thrive and just be themselves. But we can only do that if we understand what they need. So what do they need? I'm going to put this out to you guys again. Let's have some suggestions on what you think a reasonable adjustment is. What would be a typical reasonable adjustment in the workplace that you might have seen or suggested or implemented perhaps? Because this is the expectation now. The law requires any employer to make reasonable adjustments. The amount of money you're expected to spend on those reasonable adjustments varies according to the size of the company. But ultimately, it is a requirement of every employer. Ebony, not having to be on camera all the time. Oh, I wish I'd thought of that earlier. I forgot to say that. Yeah, if you want to have your camera off, feel free. Thank you for reminding me of that. But yeah, absolutely. Working from home. Yeah, for some people, the office environment is a sensory nightmare. Too bright, too loud, too smelly, too noisy. Working from home, you can create a safe haven and a space where you can make it sensory comfortable. Adjusting the hiring process. Jodie, I'm so pleased to hear you say that, because if we get that wrong, we miss talent, huge amounts of talent, just by not understanding how to set it up right. Software, yeah, Sarah, you're absolutely spot on. There's so much software out there now to support people. So for a dyslexic person, they can get read and write software that allows them to listen to emails or speak reports and messages, and that'll turn it into documents and transcripts for you. So much out there, some really good stuff. You've got reading pens. You can just sort of go across the book, across the line, and it will read it out loud for you. Loads of fascinating things available. Elaine, very good point. Very good point. Elaine says, it depends on the person's situation. That is a critical point, because every single individual person has a different name. As I've got at the bottom of every slide, no two brains are the same. So if no two brains are the same, we can't assume that by making one reasonable adjustment, it'll solve everybody's problems. So perfect, yeah. And it could be lighting, working somewhere quieter, agendas for meetings, another great one. Now, if you need certainty, routine, clarity, as an autistic individual would, not having an agenda for a meeting is very stressful, because you don't know what's going to happen. Are you involved in it? How long is it going to last? When will it start? When will it finish? What's my part? What do I do? Very uncomfortable stuff. And Stacey, you're right, ask them what they want. I'd love to imagine that every employer would do that. But interestingly, I found through working in this field that a lot of people don't know what they want, or they don't know what's out there. There's a great question you can use as someone who's in a supporting role. Instead of saying, what do you need? Try asking them, talk me through your day or talk me through your week, and mention anything that you find a challenge. And by phrasing it that way, when somebody says, what do you need? Sometimes we just, I don't know what I need. I'm just burnt out by 3 o'clock. And actually talk me through your day, help me understand where your challenges are, can be a much easier way of finding out where they're getting worn out. Wendy, yeah, creating a culture where individual feels happy to state what they need without judgment. And wouldn't that be a perfect world if we could just, if we just did that? And that's not just for neurodivergent people, that's for everyone. That's for menopausal people and tired people and people who are going through stress or trauma at home. Just, yeah, we could create a culture where people could speak out and say, you know what, if you gave me this, I could be so much better at my job. And without the judgment, it's key point. Flexible with clothing, yeah. Clarity around workwear is a really important thing. For some people, they need a uniform. For some people, some clothing can be itchy and scratchy and unbearably uncomfortable. One of my autistic friends cuts the label out of every item of clothing she owns. The first thing she does, cuts the label out and picks out all the stitching inside. Do I think AI could help implementing new adjustments? I'm not sure, Jodie, and the reason I'm not too sure on that is because I have so far avoided AI to some degree. It's not something I've seen the films. I think the world's going to be all taken over by computers, but yeah, better ask somebody who knows more about AI than that one. So yeah, so low cost but reasonable adjustments. So many great ones there. They don't have to be a big thing. I mean, obviously, it's totally appropriate if a person needs a wheelchair ramp or a certain type of seat or desk, then that's completely appropriate. But a lot of reasonable adjustments are virtually free. I mean, something like setting an agenda, giving people notice when there's a meeting change or a location change. If you're going to have a social at a pub, for example, tell people in advance where it's going to be, send them a link to where it's going to be. Because for an autistic person to go into an environment where there's lots of people and they are unfamiliar with the environment, that's very stressful. Whereas obviously they can look at it online, they can suss out, maybe I know what I'm going to drink and where I'm going to sit. It allows them to plan in advance, takes a lot of the anxiety out of the experience. What else is there? Oh, so many things. A quiet room. Every organisation should have a quiet room. The amount of companies I've worked with where the only quiet room is the toilet. And that's where people go. I'm going to the loo and they like 10, 15 minutes disappear just because they need a space where they can self-regulate, decompress, get back to okay. So finding a way to create a space, a quiet room of some sort, make a huge difference. I've got one client that put out a basket of sunglasses and caps in the office because some people had said they didn't like the lighting, it was a bit bright. They couldn't really afford to replace it. And it was a bigger cost than they could afford. So they said, okay, if you want to, wear a cap at your desk or have some sunglasses. And some people took them. Not only the neurodivergent people with headaches and hangovers took them too. So it was generally a useful idea. It could be just permissions. That's another free thing. You might decide to give permission that in our meetings, you can stand up and walk around. In our meetings, you can use a fidget toy. And here's some fidget toys. It could be that you give people permission to take their shoes off at work. One of my autistic friends is very vocal about the fact that she hates shoes. And as soon as she arrives, no matter where she is, the first thing she does is take her shoes off, which is great because she always wears odd socks. So it's highly entertaining. See what she's got on. But something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be expensive. But you do have to understand in order to be able to start to identify the right solutions. And of course, as you've quite rightly said, many of you, ask the person. If they don't know, try working with them on that. So what is it like to be neurodivergent? That's an interesting question. Excuse me. On this session, because we've only got an hour, I'm not sort of doing the whole detail of what each neurotype is and what it's like. That's something I do on the trainings that we do. But I can mention some of the key things that you might want to be aware of. Because for a neurodivergent person, for many of them, their experience of being at school and college and university won't have been great. They will have probably experienced shame and embarrassment and humiliation for not being smart enough or not being social enough or not being reliable enough. And so for an autistic person, going to a big social event, lots of variety, lots of change can be incredibly stressful, really, really difficult to cope with, and can cause, real emotional pain. So they might be branded as unfriendly. A dyslexic person who has to literally decode every word they read and recode before they can interpret it takes a lot longer to read. Well, in school, that means that people are pointing at them because they haven't finished the page they've been told to read. The ADHD brain, as is mine, I always thought I was just a bit rubbish at getting to places on time. But I in earlier jobs and in school, I used to get loads of trouble for being late or being disorganized. I remember on my school report, it said, if only we could get her to concentrate. But it sticks with you and you start to turn it into your identity. It's who I am. I'm just a bit rubbish at being human. But as we're starting to learn more, and we still don't know even a tiny amount of really understanding the different types of brains, but as we learn more, what can happen is we start to appreciate what it's like to be neurodivergent. And when we can appreciate that, we can experience it differently. So, for example, for a neurodivergent person, an autistic person, the need to have a quiet space. They can self-regulate, they can bring their stress chemicals and their anxiety down to a level of calm, can make such a big difference. The need to have the mechanisms that work for them in place can be so powerful. It can literally stop a person from being able to move. So if an autistic person has isn't it funny? I've got so many acronyms in my head right at this moment. I can't think of it. Pathological demand avoidance, PDA. It means that when somebody asks them to do something, they suddenly can't do it, even if they already wanted to. So I was just about to go and make everybody a coffee, and somebody says, "Can you make us a coffee?" Now I can't do it. My legs literally won't move in the direction of the coffee machine because I've got to respond to that. That's how my body responds to that kind of request. But if we understand that, we're still going to get them to make coffee. It's not a case of they get out of the job, but it's about how you phrase it or creating a system that works for that person. Maybe have a rota so that they know it's their turn to make coffee at a certain time. But the physical experience of not getting what you need as a neurodivergent person it's awful. It's horrible. If anybody's experienced extreme anxiety states, emotional sort of fatigue, exhaustion, mental just shut down, all of these things happen when the things that you absolutely need to be in place just aren't there. And they're so easy most of the time to fix it. If you've got somebody who's always late for a meeting because they're neurodivergent, because they're ADHD, and they always try and cram something in that actually takes 9 minutes into a gap that's only 5 minutes, which never happens all the time. That person, we work out how to do the meetings in a different way, or we arrange that they will meet and have a pre-meet so that they're in the right place for the meeting. There's all sorts of things you can do, simple things, cost nothing, just help that person be able to attend and do the things that you need them to do. So it's a tough, could you give me an example of how else you could ask them to make a coffee in a way that wouldn't be overwhelming? So somebody with PDA who would genuinely reject any sort of formal direct request, suggestion can be really helpful. Although the challenging part of that is for an autistic person, sometimes suggestion isn't very helpful. They need a bit of clarity. But something as simple, Emily, as a rota. You know, you make the coffees at 3, I make them at 10 the next morning, and somebody else makes them at lunchtime. Because then they know what's coming, they know it's their turn, they know, and they will reliably get up and go and make the coffee without having to specifically ask it as a direct request. If you have somebody who's got PDA, work with them, because most adults have figured out that that's something they have to deal with. They might be able to tell you, if you put it on a post-it and leave it on my desk, I can do it then. But if you say it to me, I can't. So work with that individual. Hopefully that helps. So it is, and again, there's a great documentary, Chris Packham, and it's called something like Inside Our Autistic Minds. It's only 4 episodes, fantastic way of seeing how, for example, with autism, you have got, if you know one autistic person, you still only know what autism is like for one person. Everyone is different. As was mentioned in the comments earlier, it depends on the person, as Elaine said. So yeah, we can't generalize here. We take a risk, but there are some generalizations we can make. The main thing for a neurodivergent person is quite often they're masking, and masking is exhausting. So someone who is masking will be effectively acting the part that they think you want them to play in order to fit in and be perceived as normal. You ask an actor if they can act 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without a day off, and they'll tell you that's tough. So most people who mask will keep their happy, smiley, normal face on at work and then go home and be allowed to take their mask off, but that can be tough for the family. And you often see this with children who've been brave and tough and smiley at school, and then they can be really troublesome when they get home. So it's, yeah, a lot of this is just trying to understand the individual's experience and then how you can work around that. Because neurodivergent people aren't broken. They're just a square peg in a round hole. The best thing to do is change the shape of the hole or make it flexible. And then that person can really start to thrive and be at their best. Any questions on that so far? Okay, thank you. That's good. Right. So what are we talking about now? What are we trying to do that makes a difference? Proactive inclusion is the idea that let's not wait for somebody to come and say, I'm dyspraxic, I need you to give me unbreakable mugs and move my desk further away from the other corners. Why need to do that? Look at the environment and just think, okay, is there something we can do if we're seeing any kind of repetitive incident or behavior that can mitigate that and take away the challenge for that? Now, there's an image that you've probably all seen. It's very popular. I've got a different version of it, which I've borrowed from the lovely Deloitte report from 2018. If you imagine everybody's been given an equal bit of support, so they've all got an equal size rock, that's equality at its best in theory, but the poor little one on the end can't see a thing, so the outcome isn't equal. The next image says, okay, looking at all available resources, we've spread things around a bit. This is a slightly different version. Normally the guy on the left doesn't have one at all. But at least the outcome is better. Everybody's able to see the view. The problem with this alternative, and this is what's often referred to as equity, is that the little guy on the end still got to ask for more. Can I have a bit extra? Can I have something different? And that can be incredibly uncomfortable if you're trying to pretend that there's nothing different about you. The third one is a simple idea of proactive inclusion. Take away the barrier. Although when I first looked at this, I thought, yeah, that looks like a cliff edge. So I thought we need a couple of lines there just to make it a bit safer. But it's about thinking differently. It's about going, okay, there needs to be a safe fence. Does it need to be solid? There needs to be a way that everyone can be at their best without having to ask for extra support. So proactive inclusion is about getting together with the people in your organisations and going, okay, what are the potential barriers that make it difficult for people who might be neurodivergent? Looking at signage, for example, have we got lots of good, clear signage? If somebody walks into our kitchen, for example, and they've never been there before, will they know which cups to use? Will they know what to do with their dirty cup? Is it clearly signed? Are the signs shiny? Is it all laminated in gloss? Could we swap that and laminate them in matte? So take the glare off. Is it possible we could just put a slight tint on all of our white backgrounds on our PowerPoint presentations? So it removes the glare, makes it easier for somebody who's mentally tired or suffering executive dysfunction, or somebody who is dyslexic, to be able to read it more easily. Are there things that we could do, as was mentioned earlier, in the onboarding process? Not everybody can sit in an environment in a training room and take on board a lot of information. Perhaps the training room is great for some people, but for others, they're so socially uncomfortable, afraid of saying the wrong thing, making a fool of themselves. They won't speak out, they won't say anything, they won't get involved. And all they're doing is sitting there thinking, please don't pick on me. So maybe that person would be better off with a written manual or a process map or some a video of a training event that they can watch in their own time in bite-sized chunks. And certainly for an ADHD, sitting still in a training room or a long meeting or a conference can be painful, making it okay for anyone to get up. It's funny when somebody stands up in a training room and sort of goes like this, everybody just assumes they've got a bad back and they need to stand up, but nobody moans. It's fine. There's no reason why you can't move around in a meeting if we just decide that that's the case. So really getting together, ideally with your sort of senior managers or your colleagues or your clients, and saying, what can we do to anticipate that our next employee might be neurodivergent so that when they get here, they don't have to ask for anything. We've already thought of it and we've put things in place to make it as easy as possible. Because generally what you're trying to achieve here is anxiety reduction. What can we do to stop them reaching meltdown, shutdown, executive dysfunction and overwhelm and sensory overload? All of the things that pretty much make most brains fairly unhelpful. And when we think about presenteeism, which is a fairly popular term at the moment, somebody sitting at a desk, they're there, but their brain's not there and they're not engaged and they're not able to function, it's highly likely that their brain is just going, nope, I don't want to play anymore. I'm done. I've had enough. And there are things that you can do to avoid them getting to that stage in the first place. There's so many things. Just thinking about, if I was neurodivergent, what would that be like? Now, I realise this does require you to learn a bit more about what it is like to be neurodivergent, or you can ask somebody like me and I'll come and have a look. We sort of do site surveys and report back on things that you can do. But if you can start doing that, I guess the comparison for physical disabilities, going around your business in a wheelchair for the day, maybe that would give you some insight. Well, for this, try going around your business, imagining everything is brighter, louder, smellier, more itchy and scratchy, too hot, too cold. Just think about what can we do to make the environment more flexible and make it easier for people to be able to sort of be as at ease as possible. Is this all making sense? Any questions about proactive inclusion? I'm going with we're okay.
Yes, I think it's making sense. Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff.
No, I suppose also you could say to people at work, any of you identify as neurodivergent? Can you come and help us? Have a look for them to do the audit for you, almost to say, what is it that could be better, do you think? So actually use the resources, the experience of the people to help you.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Why wouldn't you do that? It makes perfect sense. You know, use the experts you've already got. Some people might not identify. I mean, I'm 60 this year. I had no clue I had ADHD. I just thought I was a bit scatty sometimes and a bit disorganized sometimes, and always tried to do more things in the day than I could possibly manage. But I've managed. I've been a very functioning, perfectly adequate, got through life, had 2 kids, kept a job, run a business. It's never really caused me a problem. But now that I'm starting to understand how my brain works, I've made changes in my home, in my life, that just work better for me. And yeah, ask people who've got lived experience. And if people are saying they don't know or they don't have any sense of that, that's fine. But you will all know somebody who's neurodivergent. I guarantee it. It's almost impossible that you don't know somebody who's neurodivergent, even if they don't know themselves. So Stacey says it's clear. Thank you. I do know a company who had a building audit recently. It's so interesting to see the report and what could be improved. Things I'd never thought of. So I've been very fortunate to have been around most of the sites in the UK for Coca-Cola. There are things we need to consider. Some things you just can't change. So in the production line, there's a lot of smells where they make Coke. There's a lot of sort of sugary sweet smells. There are flashing lights where they are checking whether or not the labels are on in the right places. People have to wear safety hats and safety boots. So you can't put a reasonable adjustment in there saying, yeah, it's okay, wear sunglasses and a flat cap and kick your boots off. That's not okay. That's not safe. But it is such a joy to go around and spot the simplest of things that are so easy to change. And it can be just by, for most sites, certainly in my experience, most sites, it was simply make a quiet space. Just have a quiet space. And most of them were already on it. They were quite ahead of the game. But the little things, the clarity, the use of language, the avoidance of things like idioms or metaphors, just simple things that can make such a difference. But yeah, it's definitely worth getting an audit or a report done. I think for most of the sites that I've done, I've usually come up with 20 or 30 little simple things that can do to make a difference. And there's lots of people like me out there that can do that. So yeah, get proactive, get ahead of the game. And that's huge for brand. You know, the organization wants to be, yes, we've got mental health first aid. Yes, we're a good business. Yes, you should want to come and work for us. You all know how difficult it is to attract talent at the moment. The Great Resignation and Brexit made it very, very difficult to find the right people. But actually, there are a lot of people out there who are desperate to work, want to work, but the interviewing process doesn't make it easy for them. So on the whole, they won't, if you put an autistic person in a assessment centre, they will fail because they won't take the lead role. They will struggle. They will appear to be too blunt or too direct. But it doesn't matter if you don't need them to do those things, if you actually just need them to be really good at working a process or system or managing something specific. So yeah, lots of different things that you can think of to do it, but not wait for somebody to ask. That's really where we're going for with this. So the difference that you can make, the National Federation of Builders report recently stated the #1 priority should be neurodiversity awareness, just making people aware. That's it. And as we've talked about, just simple things like knowing, if I give you an agenda and I give it you up front, that dramatically reduces your discomfort in a meeting. Why wouldn't I? It's just sensible to do it. The Deloitte report recently said by engaging and working with different types of thinking styles, so different neurotypes, the likelihood is you can increase productivity by something in the region of 30% by having people who see things differently and think differently. The focus on now really is just opening up people's understanding awareness campaigns, awareness training, just yourselves. You know, the more you learn, the more you invest, the more you understand, the more you'll spot things. And it's every day's a school day for me. I'm probably on about somewhere in the region of 80, 90 books on the subject. And I still, every time I open the cover of another one, I go, hadn't seen it like that. Okay, there's another thing. So be open to the possibilities, that things can be different. So Helen says, with 1,500 employees across about 50 sites, where and what do you suggest we start with awareness? Okay, so I would definitely start with working groups. I would look at what the employees think they need already. That's your sort of first and relatively cost-free process. You can get someone like me or one of the Thrive team or other site assessors to come round, basically give you a long list, a nice big report, say, just do this. The awareness training, and I hope it's all right, I don't want to go into a sales pitch here, but the awareness training that we do a 1 hour webinar, which is an aware, we call it an aware, it's CPD accredited. You get an electronic flipping book, like a manual, and an electronic badge that you can put on your email footer. I'm running one on the 29th, actually, if anybody's interested. Slip that one in. And it's just a 1 hour webinar. Now, you could run that for thousands of people. We don't do more than 40 at a time because we like people to be able to ask questions. There's half-day sessions. We do a champions course where anyone who's in a supportive role can learn much more depth, much more detail about the experience of being neurodivergent, the challenges, how it shows up in the workplace, and also the managers course we do, which is, you know, sometimes you may have to performance manage, but more often than not, what you really want to do is engage, support, and motivate it. And it's how to do all of that. So there's lots of things that you can do. And again, it doesn't, you know, I didn't want this to be a sales pitch. You can do it with, there's lots out there. If you're willing to look, please feel free to get in touch with me. I'm more than happy to point you in the direction of what I'm doing and what we're doing, but also, you know, anywhere and everywhere. There's so many people now looking in this direction. Just do something. That's, I guess, what I was saying. Just do something, expand your own knowledge, and as much as possible, increase awareness of everyone else. My dream, if I won the lottery, I would go around schools and teach kids this, because then we wouldn't have a problem in the future. So the crazy thing is, while we've got all these labels of this person's autistic, that person has ADHD, that person is dyslexic, dyspraxic, dysgraphic, Tourette's, they are all labels that we then categorize and decide how that person needs to be dealt with. Comorbidities complicates that, because my daughter is both autistic and ADHD, and some of the reasonable adjustments you might think of are actually contradictory, because part of her brain needs variety and interest, and the other part of her brain needs process and structure. So, you know, those can be a challenge. But when you understand that, you can start to work around the best ways of doing things. All right, we've got a message here from Emily that are there laws currently in place to protect neurodivergent people in the workplace? Oh, yes. I'm not sure if they're covered under the wider umbrella of disability legislation. Yes, they are. And actually, I think I've got a copy of it, not to hand. They're covered by the protected characteristics. So there's 9 protected characteristics, which includes mental disability or learning disability, and it comes into that. But yeah, and they don't have to have a diagnosis. If you identify as neurodivergent, you are protected by the Equality Act 2010. So yes, and it's more and more people, because of awareness increasing, are starting to realize that, oh, that's why everybody thinks I'm too blunt. Okay, I get it. So yeah, they are very much protected. There was a PwC report stating that the number of, in fact, I put it in the HRHuddle Facebook group if you want to have a look, the number of tribunals that's actually citing neurodiversity as the reason for being discriminated against has gone up dramatically. It was over 500 last year. So it is a very real thing in your world that you're going to come across. And so your knowledge, and also expanding the knowledge of the managers in your companies, so important now to make sure that we can avoid these. In the managers course, we teach a very simple model. It's a triangle model. We do love a model. It's normally squares, but we like a triangle. But it's basically 3 main chunks of things that a person as a manager can do to avoid a tribunal. Very simple, very easy to understand, and I've never yet have anybody go, well, I'm not doing that. They've all gone, oh, that makes sense. So yeah, we've created something that's really easy to avoid getting into trouble, really. So I'm probably gone over a bit. I do get excited about this subject. And I'm going to give you all a copy of the slides. There's a bit more information on the last couple of slides for anybody who wants to know any more. Eloise, you've got to go. Oh, school run, very important. I hope you found it useful. That's great. Please connect to me on LinkedIn if you can. Have a look at the recording. And I'm always here for you. So you can get hold of me now. I'm on your the HRHuddle Facebook page, or you can get me on LinkedIn. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions or point you in any direction that might be useful. There's loads of great material. The charities have got tons of great stuff out there. So yeah, if you just know where to look, the information's available. And in many cases, it's free. Eloise, is there anything that you wanted to say?
No, that was brilliant. Thank you, Mo. I was going to say, so you mentioned the courses. When I send out the recording and the slides, if you can give me a list of the courses and the dates, then I can circulate them for everybody, because I think they will they'll want to know that. Yeah. But I was just going to reiterate, if anybody's got any questions on neurodiversity, I'll send you all of Mo's contact details. But she is on the Facebook, the HRHuddle Facebook group, so you can message her directly on there. Or she's also put some great information on there already, which you can have a look at. But thank you so much, Mo, for sharing. It's really appreciative, and great to see everybody. Well, the little snippets that I've seen of people, for those that wanted their cameras on, but obviously nobody ever needs to feel that they need to have their camera on. So thank you for joining us. And if anybody has any other challenges or topics that they want us to cover in future HR huddles, again, please reach out and let me know, and we can organise other great guest speakers like Mo. So thank you very much, everybody, and I will see you all soon.